What if the faces you grew up idolizing, the stars who made America dream, were hiding more than just old school glamour? Imagine Hollywood's most flawless legends, not in the soft glow of the spotlight, but under the harsh fluorescent glare of the FBI. That's right. While you were swooning over screen icons, J. Edgar Hoover's finest were digging through their trash. Ever wonder what the government really knew about your favorite star? Brace yourself. These newly declassified files rewrite the history of old Hollywood, one secret at a time. Charlie Chaplin. If you thought Charlie Chaplin's greatest performance was on the silver screen, think again. His real-life role? Enemy of the state. That's not hyperbole. When you're the most famous man on earth, with a mustache more recognizable than a presidential seal, you don't just get paparazzi, you get the FBI. Chaplin, the British-born genius behind city lights and modern times, came to America as the king of silent comedy. But as the 20th century roared on, his films got sharper, his opinions louder, and suddenly Hollywood's beloved tramp was labeled dangerous. Why? Because Chaplin dared to use his art as a weapon, skewering dictators in The Great Dictator, poking fun at poverty, and openly supporting causes that made the American establishment break out in hives. What did the FBI have on Chaplin? Try a 2,000-page file. Every love affair, every questionable donation, every un-American quip scribbled down and analyzed. Hoover's agents tracked his politics, his passport, and even his bedroom. They obsessed over his relationships with leftist intellectuals and artists. When Chaplin supported Russian war relief during World War II, that was flagged. When he criticized fascism before it was cool, that was flagged too. The FBI also hounded him over paternity scandals and visa problems, using moral outrage as a smokescreen for political suspicion. But here's the kicker. Chaplin wasn't even a communist. He was too much of a contrarian for any one box. But his celebrity made him a symbol. By the early 1950s, the pressure was relentless. In 1952, while Chaplin sailed to London for a film premiere, the U.S. government revoked his re-entry permit. No warning, no apology, just a boot out the back door. Chaplin, heartbroken and furious, never returned to live in America. His legacy, once the pride of Hollywood, was now radioactive. Chaplin's story isn't just about surveillance, it's about the cost of speaking out. The files reveal a man battered by suspicion, but never silenced by it. In the end, Chaplin had the last laugh. Hollywood may have tried to erase him, but the world still remembers. His greatest crime? Daring to remind us that laughter and truth can be subversive? Jean Seberg. Picture this. A fresh-faced American actress, blonde, bold, and heartbreakingly earnest, becomes an international star, only to be shattered by her own government. That's Jean Seberg's real-life script, and no noir director could have written it darker. Seberg burst onto the scene as Joan of Arc, handpicked by Otto Preminger, and then immortalized by the French New Wave in Breathless. She should have been untouchable. Instead, her story became a cautionary tale about what happens when you mix Hollywood dreams with Washington's nightmares. By the late 1960s, Jean Seberg wasn't just another pretty face. She was a vocal supporter of civil rights, donating money and time to the Black Panthers and Native American activists. For the FBI, that was enough to paint a target on her back. Under J. Edgar Hoover's COINTELPRO, one of the most notorious domestic surveillance programs in U.S. history, Seberg's life became government business. Her phone was tapped, her mail was read, her every move was shadowed. But the real blow came when the FBI decided to destroy her reputation from the inside out. In 1970, agents planted a vicious lie in the press, whispering that Seberg's pregnancy was the result of an affair with a Black Panther. The rumor, engineered to break her, spread like wildfire. Hollywood gossips lapped it up, studios turned cold, and Seberg's private grief became a public circus. Her baby died shortly after birth, a tragedy made unbearable by the headlines. The FBI's goal was to neutralize her. What they accomplished was devastation. The newly declassified files are chilling in their precision, detailing smear campaigns, psychological warfare, and outright character assassination. Seberg's career never recovered. Haunted by depression and paranoia, she spent her final years in exile in France, rarely working and always looking over her shoulder. In 1979, she was found dead in Paris. Her life ended by a suspected suicide. To this day, her story is a warning about the price of dissent in a country obsessed with controlling its own narrative. Jean Seberg was more than a casualty. She was collateral damage in an undeclared war. The FBI files don't just expose her. They expose the ruthless machinery that can grind up even the brightest star. Fame offers no protection when power decides you're the enemy. Lucille Ball. You'd think the most beloved face in sitcom history, America's goofy, flame-haired sweetheart, would be the last person tangled up in a communist scandal. But in 1953, when the headlines screamed Lucy named by the FBI, the country almost lost its collective mind. Yes, Lucille Ball, the queen of laughter, landed smack in the middle of the Red Scare. And you better believe Hoover's agents took notes. The trouble started with a single checkmark. In 1936, long before anyone dreamed of "I Love Lucy," Ball registered to vote as a member of the Communist Party. She said it was just to please her dying grandfather, an old-school labor activist. But context doesn't matter when there are lists to compile and careers to ruin. When Congress and the FBI went hunting for subversives, they found Ball's registration and pounced. Suddenly, Lucy was on the hot seat. FBI agents trawled her past looking for signs of radicalism. The House Un-American Activities Committee called her in for questioning. The media exploded with speculation. Studio executives panicked. Was America's favorite comedienne a secret communist? Ball didn't exactly help her case by having progressive friends, an open mind, and a razor-sharp wit that could cut through political nonsense. But Ball refused to wilt under the spotlight. She testified that she never attended a meeting, never paid dues, and never promoted communist ideology. Her only crime was a granddaughter's loyalty. For a few white-knuckle weeks, her entire career hung in the balance. Studios worried about public backlash, advertisers considered bailing, and the press camped on her doorstep. Imagine one of the most bankable stars in the world nearly brought down by a paperwork technicality and a wave of paranoia. Yet Lucy's real-life comedic timing saved the day. Daisy Arnaz, ever the showman, opened a live taping of "I Love Lucy" with, "The only thing red about Lucy is her hair, and even that's not legitimate." The audience roared. America exhaled. The network held the line. Lucy wasn't canceled. She was practically canonized. Still, the FBI file remained, a shadow in the archives. If nothing else, the saga proved that fame and laughter aren't bulletproof vests against government suspicion. In post-war America, nobody, not even Lucy, was too beloved to escape Hoover's suspicious gaze. In the end, Ball's biggest joke might be that the most wholesome woman in Hollywood almost got taken down by a color on a card. John Garfield. To moviegoers, John Garfield was the street-smart tough guy with a sensitive streak, the original method actor before the method had a name. But off-screen, the real drama wasn't in smoky backrooms or boxing rings. It was in the thick, ever-growing folders stamped FBI-born Jacob Julius Garfinkel. Garfield grew up fighting for every scrap of dignity on the Lower East Side. That raw edge became his trademark, making him a Hollywood A-lister in The Postman Always Rings Twice and Body and Soul. But Garfield wasn't interested in studio politics or playing nice with power. He spoke out for labor rights, performed for the troops, and refused to play the Hollywood game. In post-war America, that made him interesting and dangerous. As the Cold War paranoia peaked, Garfield's real-life associations became headlines. He had friends on the left, showed up at union rallies, and never shied away from controversial causes. In a country where guilt by association was the unofficial motto, the FBI took notice. Their files on Garfield paint a man under constant watch, phone taps, mail checks, shadowy agents lurking near studios, and every public statement scrutinized for a hint of un-American activity. Then came the subpoena. Garfield was dragged before HUAC, expected to betray friends and name names. He refused, standing by his principles but at enormous personal cost. Studios turned cold, roles dried up, and the press started whispering. Garfield's heart, a literal ticking time bomb, thanks to childhood rheumatic fever, couldn't keep up with the pressure. He collapsed, isolated and exhausted, at just 39 years old. The newly released FBI files reveal the psychological siege Garfield endured. Pages and pages of anonymous tips, studio rumors, and bureaucratic paranoia, all for a man whose real crime was refusing to snitch. He was never proven to be a communist, but in Hoover's America, suspicion was enough to exile you from your own life. Garfield's downfall wasn't a Hollywood melodrama. It was a slow-motion tragedy engineered by government paranoia. His file stands as a case study in how the machinery of suspicion can chew up even the toughest actor. In the end, Garfield fought the good fight, but the system never let him get off the ropes. Edward G. Robinson. Edward G. Robinson, Little Caesar himself, looked like he'd never blink at a threat. But when the FBI set its sights on Hollywood, even Robinson couldn't talk his way out of the dragnet. On screen, he was the original gangster. Off screen, he was a lover of art, a voracious reader, and a passionate supporter of civil liberties. Too passionate, if you ask J. Edgar Hoover. Robinson was born Emanuel Goldenberg in Romania and brought a classic outsider's hustle to Hollywood. He played gangsters, yes, but lived like a mensch, hosting salons, funding anti-fascist causes, and giving generously to European refugees. In the 1930s and 40s, that kind of philanthropy made you a hero. By the McCarthy era, it got your name on a list. The FBI opened a thick file on Robinson, chronicling every donation, every meeting, and every opinion that didn't toe the official line. The files show a steady drip of paranoia. Robinson's association with left-wing groups, his vocal opposition to Nazism and fascism, and his tireless support for free speech. Every check he wrote for a war relief fund became evidence of radical sympathies. Under the studio system, rumors moved faster than truth, and by the late 40s, Robinson found himself called before HUAC. Suddenly, the tough guy who'd stared down 1,000 gangsters on film was being grilled by real-life interrogators about the company he kept and the causes he championed. Robinson played defense, testifying that his only ideology was Americanism and explaining that he'd been duped by front groups hiding communist agendas. But Hollywood didn't care about nuance. Studios, scared of public backlash, quietly dropped him from A-list roles. Robinson was too dignified to name names. He offered explanations, not accusations. That principled stand cost him his leading man status. By the 1950s, Robinson was doing B-movies and radio work, grateful for any role that let him keep his integrity and his SAG card. The declassified FBI documents are a time capsule of Cold War hysteria, a reminder that, in a paranoid America, a bleeding heart was just as suspect as a clenched fist. Robinson's legacy survived, but not unscathed. Hollywood eventually welcomed him back, but the scars, personal and professional, never quite faded. Edward G. Robinson went to war with the system, armed only with conscience. In the end, he proved you can play the villain and still be a victim of your times. Paul Robeson. If anyone ever scared the FBI with nothing but a baritone and a spine of steel, it was Paul Robeson. Imagine a man who could sell out Carnegie Hall, electrify crowds from Moscow to Mississippi, and still end up on America's most-watched blacklist. Robeson's life reads like a spy novel, but the villain was never foreign. It was the men with files and phones in Washington. Robeson wasn't just a singer and actor. He was a world-class athlete, a lawyer, and most dangerously for 1940s America, a loud, proud political dissenter. He championed workers' rights, spoke out against lynching, refused to play for segregated audiences, and called for peace with the Soviet Union during the hottest days of the Cold War. In an era when most stars played it safe, Robeson took the stage and demanded justice. To the FBI, this made him public enemy number one. The files on Robeson run thick with paranoia, transcripts of bugged phone calls, reports from undercover informants, and endless memos about his un-American speeches. He was shadowed at rallies, tailed at hotels, and interrogated by officials. The FBI even leaned on the State Department to yank his passport, trapping him in the U.S. and cutting off his income. Robeson didn't just get canceled, he got grounded. The pressure was relentless. Concert halls closed their doors, record labels backed away. But Robeson, never the type to shrink from a fight, turned every attack into a new rallying cry. He gave legendary concerts over the telephone to audiences in Europe, broadcast his defiance across borders, and filed lawsuits against the government. The more they squeezed, the louder he got. What's stunning about Robeson's FBI file is its sheer intensity. Hundreds of pages tracking every movement, every utterance, every association. His only crime was refusing to shut up. The system couldn't handle a black man with a global audience and no fear. The pressure wore on him mentally and physically, but the files never captured his soul. Paul Robeson's name was dragged through the mud, but he emerged as a symbol, proof that the loudest voices are often the first targeted. The newly declassified files don't expose a traitor. They reveal a hero who dared to demand more from his country and paid for it with everything but his dignity. Orson Welles. If you think Hollywood's enfant terrible got away with everything, think again. Orson Welles, the boy wonder behind Citizen Kane, didn't just rattle the cages of movie studios. He had J. Edgar Hoover's finest sweating bullets. Genius, yes. Uncontrollable, definitely. But safe from surveillance? Not a chance. Welles became famous overnight for Citizen Kane, a film many read as a slap in the face to American power. It wasn't just the media tycoon he lampooned. It was the very idea that the powerful could control their own stories. Welles loved to poke the bear, but he poked one too many when he became an outspoken critic of American politics and a champion for the underdog. The FBI files on Welles are a tangled web of rumors, accusations, and nervous speculation. He had leftist friends. He supported the Spanish Republicans, railed against racism on the radio, and called out fascism long before World War II made it trendy. The FBI, ever hungry for a headline, tracked his every speech, public appearance, and even his private correspondence. When Welles made waves with his infamous War of the Worlds radio broadcasts, convincing half the country that Martians were invading, he didn't just spook the public, he embarrassed the establishment. The files note it with almost grudging respect. But things got serious when Welles used his platform for activism. He marched for civil rights, supported unions, and, worst of all in Cold War America, refused to keep quiet about U.S. hypocrisy abroad. The FBI tracked his travels, flagged his scripts, and even kept tabs on his romantic life. Studio bosses, already wary of his ego, found the government's suspicion convenient. Blacklisted by proxy, Welles found his Hollywood offers drying up, forcing him into a decades-long exile of independent projects, many self-funded and always under the shadow of suspicion. The declassified documents show a government more afraid of ideas than actual crimes. Welles, for all his bluster and showmanship, was hounded not for what he did, but for what he said and who listened. The files reveal a man whose every creative risk became a political act. Orson Welles, always larger than life, proved you don't need a secret plot to be treated as a threat. All you need is a microphone, a point of view, and a refusal to shut up. The real Kane mystery? How many of America's best stories were smothered by fear? Judy Garland. Judy Garland, Dorothy herself, could follow the yellow brick road straight into your heart, but she couldn't outrun government suspicion. That's right, even the girl from Kansas ended up with an FBI file, proof that nobody, not even America's most beloved songbird, was immune from Hoover's curiosity. To the world, Garland was the dazzling talent with a voice that made the world believe in magic. But behind the curtain, life was messier. Garland had her demons, addiction, heartbreak, a studio system that chewed her up and spat her out. And while most of her troubles were tabloid fodder, a newly revealed trove of FBI documents suggests she also wandered into political crossfire. The real reason for the file: associations and accidents of history. Garland was known for her friendships with politically active artists, and she supported causes that were labeled suspect in post-war America. She headlined benefits for civil rights groups, befriended blacklisted writers, and, maybe most fatally, never hid her distaste for Hollywood hypocrisy. Her FBI file is light on scandal but heavy on guilt by association. Agents tracked her charity work, compiled gossip from informants, and even noted her vocal support for controversial colleagues. But here's where it gets weird. The same agents who tracked her were often, it seems, enchanted by her. Notes in the files talk about her magnetic personality and unusual generosity. It's as if Hoover's men couldn't quite decide whether she was a threat to the Republic or just a threat to their heartstrings. Garland never faced the blacklist head-on like other stars, but the chill of suspicion followed her for decades. Studios worried about her reliability. The press ran with every whiff of controversy. In the end, Judy's greatest battles were personal, not political, but the FBI file proves that in old Hollywood, even the act of being yourself could attract government attention. Judy Garland's surveillance story isn't a blockbuster, but it's a perfect Hollywood footnote. Proof that in the golden age, a little stardust didn't stop the cold gaze of authority. In the land of the free, you could make the whole world sing. Just don't expect privacy while you're at it. Dalton Trumbo. If you've ever watched a movie in secret, you're in good company. Dalton Trumbo wrote them that way. As one of the infamous Hollywood 10, Trumbo's career is a masterclass in beating the system, even while the FBI was scribbling down every move he made. Forget the stereotype of the blacklisted artist in exile. Trumbo kept writing, kept winning, and forced the industry to admit that talent can't be erased by paranoia. Trumbo started as a high-flying screenwriter in the 30s and 40s, racking up hits like Kitty Foyle and 30 Seconds Over Tokyo. But his progressive politics and a refusal to rat out colleagues landed him in the crosshairs of the House Un-American Activities Committee. When he refused to testify in 1947, he was cited for contempt, sent to prison, and immediately blacklisted by every major studio. The FBI's file on Trumbo reads like a tragicomic opera: surveillance, intercepted mail, wiretaps, and endless speculation about his network. Trumbo responded with pure audacity. While exiled from Hollywood, he became a one-man script factory, churning out screenplays under a web of pseudonyms. The result? 2 Oscars won in secret, Roman Holiday and The Brave One, with his name nowhere on the credits. The declassified files show agents genuinely baffled. How was Trumbo still so prolific? Who was helping him? The truth was both simple and embarrassing for the establishment. Hollywood needed Trumbo more than they needed a blacklist. When his friends started winning awards with scripts he'd ghostwritten, the absurdity reached a boiling point. In 1960, Kirk Douglas and director Otto Preminger blew up the blacklist by publicly crediting Trumbo for Spartacus in Exodus. The wall of silence collapsed. The man the FBI tried to erase became the industry's conscience. Trumbo's story, as revealed by the files, is less about ideological warfare and more about survival, cunning, and a refusal to stay quiet. The system tried to starve him, but Trumbo just found a new recipe for success. His greatest revenge? Every time his words flickered across a screen, the blacklist looked just a little bit sillier. Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra had the voice, the looks, and the swagger, but what really set Hoover's boys buzzing? The rumors, the headlines, the irresistible possibility that America's favorite crooner was tangled up with mobsters, communists, and more. No Golden Age file is fatter or more gossipy than Sinatra's, and it reads like a B-movie noir, only the paranoia was all too real. Sinatra's FBI file is a hall of mirrors: reports of mafia connections, whispers of union racketeering, allegations of communist sympathies, and plenty of tales about his wild private life. Hoover, a man who understood power, recognized that Sinatra was more than just a singer. He was a cultural juggernaut, a man who could swing an election with a smile. And that made him dangerous. Some rumors were pure invention, anonymous tips about Frank hosting secret meetings or passing messages to mob bosses. Others had a kernel of truth. Sinatra moved in powerful circles, rubbed shoulders with JFK, and was never shy about expressing his opinions. The FBI tailed him from Vegas to Miami, collecting every scrap of gossip, no matter how absurd. There are pages devoted to nothing but anonymous phone calls, breathless tips about shady characters at the Copacabana, and obsessive speculation about his political alliances. Sinatra, for his part, was aware and unamused. He needled the bureau in interviews, joked about his permanent tail, and once even requested his own file under the Freedom of Information Act, just for laughs. But the attention wasn't all fun and games. Some deals went south. Relationships turned frosty. The Kennedys distanced themselves when the scrutiny got too intense, leaving Sinatra to wonder whether all his friends were friends at all. The newly unsealed files show the government's obsession in Technicolor. Sinatra as both icon and suspect, victim and showman. No solid criminal evidence ever emerged, but the rumors lingered, shaping Sinatra's legacy as much as his records. In the end, Old Blue Eyes outlasted Hoover, the gossip, and the blacklist, proving that sometimes the best revenge is living long enough to watch your enemies dance to your greatest hits. So next time you watch a Golden Age classic, remember the real drama wasn't always on the screen. While Hollywood sold dreams, the FBI was busy collecting nightmares, one secret file at a time. Did these revelations change how you see your favorite stars? Or does it just make the legend that much juicier? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit subscribe, and keep questioning the official story. Because in Tinseltown, and in history, what you don't see is always the most fascinating part.